All right. In our last class, we began to talk about how inexplicably, of all the world regions to start to colonize and explore the world for the first time and to discover the Americas, it was going to be European groups. Well, when European groups start to undertake global voyages of exploration, it gives them access to resources that no one else in the world will have. And as we've always said in this class, resources are going to equal power. And having excess resources puts you in a position of great political strength. And starting in this time period, European maritime empires are going to start to dominate the world and dominate regions of the world that they had never been in before. There are going to be 5 major European empires of this unit: the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Dutch, the French, and the British empires. Now, we already talked about the Portuguese Empire and what it's going to be control and how it's going to be organized. So we're going to focus today on the Spanish, Dutch, French, and British empires of period 2. Now, using new ships and exploiting knowledge of accurate cartography. And remember, cartography just means map making. The Europeans were the first ones to know where all the major bodies of land in the world were, how far apart they were. Europeans will establish the first global maritime empires. And global is important. We have had interregional interactions before. People interacting from different parts of Afro-Eurasia, like East Asia going to South Asia, or North Africa going to West Africa. But we've never had truly global interactions. And that's what these European maritime empires are going to introduce, for better or for worse. Now, unlike the land-based empires of period 1, where I spent so much time and effort saying they're going to be inclusive and they're going to be tolerant, they're going to be inclusive, they're going to be tolerant, these empires will not be that way. And this is because these empires don't have to be. They don't have to be inclusive and they don't have to be tolerant, because they're going to have such a major technological advantage over many of the regions of the world that they colonize, aka they have guns, and many of the groups of people they colonize do not. They don't have to be tolerant. And they don't have to be inclusive. When the Spanish build an empire in the Americas, you're not going to see them take on Native American bureaucrats in their system. They are going to attempt to dominate global trade and choke out any other economic competitors. And that includes each other. These 5 European empires are going to spread. Yes, but they're also going to fight with one another. They are competing empires. They are not empires that are working in conjunction with each other. They frequently will fight with one another during this time as well. I'm going to add something to my PowerPoint that I left off by mistake. They will spread European languages and religion. And that religion is Christianity. The first global religion is Christianity. We're going to talk about how that happens later on in this unit. Now, let's talk about the most powerful of the empires in this time period is going to be the Spanish Empire. Look at the amount of global territory the Spanish control in the Americas. That is an enormous amount of wealth and resources at your disposal. And this is why, for a large chunk of this time period, the Spanish Empire will be the most powerful empire on earth. They're going to control most of the Americas. In South America, in Peru, they're going to find a literal mountain made out of silver. And they're going to export this silver globally and making a tremendous amount off this trade. They're also going to grow and export sugar. And we're going to talk a lot about that, because stop and think, how do you think they're growing sugar in this time period. But sugar and silver are going to be two natural resources they exploit from the Americas, and they're going to trade them all over the world at a tremendous, tremendous profit. Now, one of the groups of people that the Spanish are really interested in trading with is China. In this time period, there's a new Chinese dynasty that has thrown the Mongols out. They are called the Ming. We're going to talk about the Ming a lot more later on. One of the things the Ming do is they are isolationists. They try to limit their interaction with outside groups, especially Europeans. But the Ming changed their currency from a paper-based currency to a silver-backed currency. Well, Spain has a huge chunk of the world's silver. So to help facilitate trade with China when you can't actually trade in China itself, the Spanish are going to colonize this island group right here. This is the Philippines. Ever wonder why an island in the Pacific is named after a Spanish king and large groups of people there speak Spanish? That's because for 400 years, the Philippines was a Spanish colony, and the Spanish used this colony to facilitate trade with the Ming, where Ming dynasty merchants would come to the Philippines and exchange traditional Chinese wealth goods, porcelain, silk, and in return get Spanish silver. And we're going to talk much, much, much more about that later on. They are the largest of the empires. So they have the most resources to extract. Now, they're the one empire that is not directly in Africa or in the Indian Ocean. So the Spanish and the Portuguese are both Catholic. Early on in colonization, these two Catholic countries almost went to war with one another over these colonies and over their voyages of exploration. Well, the Roman Catholic Pope did not want Spain and Portugal in conflict with one another. So they signed a treaty. It's called the Treaty of Tordesillas. You don't have to know that right now. But basically what the Pope did was he drew a line straight down the earth right here. And this line said, and the line of the Pope said, this is called the line of demarcation, said, Spain, you have everything to the west of this line. This gets to be your colonization. Portugal, you get everything east of this line. Now, when the Pope drew this line, he did not realize that a chunk of South America is on Portugal's side of the line. This is why Brazil becomes a Portuguese colony. The Pope, when he drew this line, he messed up. But the Spanish could not be in this region because this was designated as the Portuguese area of expansion and the Portuguese area of spreading to. So the Spanish got this side. The Portuguese had access to Africa and the Indian Ocean. This was the way of the Spanish Pope, the Roman Catholic Pope, trying to create peace between these two Catholic states. So they're going to be the one group of people not in the Indian Ocean. But they are global because they're on 4 continents. They're in Europe, North America, South America, and they have islands in Asia. That sounds pretty global to me. Anywhere the Spanish spread, they forced their religion on natives and they forced their language on natives. How do you know a region of the world once upon a time was a Spanish colony? Well, they speak Spanish and most of the people there are Roman Catholic. Places like Mexico, Cuba, Argentina, the Philippines. This is an ongoing theme. This is part of the theme of the global spread of language and religion by Europeans that start in this unit. We will spend much more time talking about how the Spanish administer all these policies in future classes. This is the Dutch Empire. Now, I want you to take a second and ask yourself, does the Dutch Empire look more like Portugal's empire that we talked about the other day, or does it look like more like the Spanish Empire? I'm going to give you a second to think about that. And the answer is the Dutch Empire looks a lot more like the Portuguese Empire. This is the Netherlands. This is where the Dutch originate from. It's a very small country. But they, too, are going to become a global trading power. They are going to build trade posts, and they're going to attempt to trade in Africa and in the Indian Ocean. Now, your question might be, wait a minute, I thought the Pope said that only Spain and Portugal could colonize the rest of the world. This is true. But the Dutch do not believe in that form of Christianity. The Dutch are going to believe in a different form of Christianity called Protestantism. We're going to talk about the Protestant Reformation later in this unit. Just know that there is a major split between the Christian branches. Well, if you're Protestant, you don't have to listen to the Roman Catholic Pope. And the Dutch don't. And they're going to undertake and build a global trade post empire. Their biggest competition is going to be the Portuguese. They are going into the Portuguese's turf. They are going into the regions of the world that the Portuguese have been attempting to exploit. You're going to see that they're going to have trade posts in West Africa. They're going to colonize the tip of Africa. And then they have trade posts all over the Indian Ocean, and they're using these trade posts to trade goods. And this gets me to a really important thing. The Dutch and the Portuguese, their wealth does not come from taking something in India and bringing it back to Europe and selling it in Europe. Their wealth comes from transporting goods from one part of the Indian Ocean, one Indian Ocean marketplace to another. In period 1, that job used to be done by Muslim merchants. In period 2, it's done by Dutch and Portuguese merchants who are oftentimes fighting with one another. I want you to notice these trade posts right here in South Asia. So they're trading in South Asia. They have trade posts in West Africa. Stop and think for a second. If you have trade posts in West Africa, what trade are you involved in? I want you to stop and think about that for just a moment. And the answer is they're slave traders. They're using these trade posts in West Africa to trade with native tribes to get slaves and sell them in the Americas. And then in the Indian Ocean, they're taking luxury goods from one region of this part of the world to another. You'll notice they've colonized this island group right here. This is Indonesia. The Dutch will control Indonesia, and this will be a prime center of their empire for hundreds of years. In fact, this is your clue if you ever saw on a map that this is the Dutch Empire and not the Portuguese Empire. The Portuguese and Dutch empires will look very, very similar, except the Dutch have this big island group that they control here, Indonesia, whereas the Portuguese would have Brazil. There's also the British Empire. Looking at it again. I wonder what these little red dots are here and here. Yes, those are trade posts. The British late in this unit try to elbow their way into Indian Ocean trade and into African trade. And by African trade, I mean the slave trade. The British are going to build trade posts in West Africa, and they're going to purchase slaves to bring them to the Americas. They're going to colonize islands in the Caribbean like Jamaica, but most famously, they're going to be known for the 13 colonies in North America. They're going to spread English. They're going to spread Protestantism, just like the Dutch. Since they're Protestants, they don't feel like they have to listen to a Roman Catholic Pope, and they don't. So the British are another example of a European empire, and they are competing. They are competing for global marketplace with the Dutch, with the Portuguese, and with the Spanish, with whom they frequently fight with. Just like in period 1, the goods in this part of the world do not change. It's just who's trading them. Again, it used to be Muslim merchants. Now it's European merchants. But you also have this new connection between the West and the Americas that these empires are going to try to exploit. And finally, you have the French Empire. Of the five, this is the least important to us. But again, I do want you to know that they have a trade post empire. Again, they have trade posts in West Africa. That must mean they're slave traders, and they are. They have islands in the Caribbean like Haiti. They're going to control a chunk of North America, that's Canada, and they're going to be trying to trade in the Indian Ocean as well. So all of this combined should let you know that Europeans' power is stretching and growing in this entire period. We're going to talk more about the impact of this in future classes, but for now, we just want to focus on the fact that Europeans are growing stronger and they are colonizing enormously large chunks of the world at this point. So I'm going to give you guys your work. I'll see you, and we'll talk about that in just a moment.